My greedy sister evicted us to sell Dad's $3 million mansion, but a hidden clause in the deed cost her everything. They say grief makes people do crazy things, but I learned the hard way that grief doesn't change who you are. It reveals exactly who you've been hiding all along. I was standing in the pouring rain outside the house I grew up in, a Victorian estate my father had spent 40 years restoring with his own hands. My clothes were soaked, my eyes were swollen, and my younger brother, Leo, was shivering next to me, holding a plastic bin filled with nothing but old photo albums. The front door opened. My older sister, Sarah, stood there. She was dry, she was warm, and she was holding a glass of our father's vintage wine, the wine he was saving for his 50th anniversary. "You have 10 minutes to get the rest of your boxes off the porch," she said, her voice flat. "The landscapers are coming, and I don't want your trash cluttering the driveway." "Sarah, please," I begged, my voice cracking. "It's pouring. Leo's wheelchair is getting stuck in the mud. Just let us wait inside until the van gets here." She took a sip of the wine, savoring it. She looked at Leo, her own brother, who has cerebral palsy. She didn't see a sibling. She saw a liability. "Not my problem, Dan. You heard the lawyer. This is my property now, and I don't want trespassers." She slammed the heavy oak door in our faces. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "I'm going to tell you how my sister stole a $3 million fortune, left her disabled brother homeless, and thought she had won the game of life. But before I tell you how the universe served her the coldest plate of karma I've ever seen, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You need to hear this, because if you have a family, you need to know how to protect them from the wolves in sheep's clothing. To understand the betrayal, you have to understand the family dynamic. There were 3 of us. I'm Dan, the middle child. I'm the one who stayed. When Mom got sick 5 years ago, I moved back in to manage her care. When Dad's heart started failing last year, I took over the family hardware business to keep the income flowing. I drove them to every appointment. I changed the bedpans. I held their hands when they were scared in the middle of the night. Then there was Leo, the youngest. Leo is 22, but he needs assistance with daily living. He's the sweetest soul you'll ever meet. My parents' biggest fear was what would happen to Leo when they were gone. They told me, repeatedly, the estate is for all of you, but the house is for Leo. He needs a home that is accessible. And then, there was Sarah, the oldest. Sarah left home at 18 and never looked back. She moved to Miami to become an influencer and lifestyle coach. We only saw her on holidays, and even then, she spent the whole time on her phone, complaining that the house smelled like old people, or that the Wi-Fi was too slow. She never contributed a dime. She never drove Dad to the hospital. In fact, the only time she called was when she needed investment capital for her latest failed business venture, a swimwear line, a juice bar, a crypto scheme. Dad always gave her money. He had a soft spot for his firstborn. "She's just trying to find her way," he'd say. But Sarah wasn't trying to find her way. She was waiting for her payday. 2 months ago, Dad passed away in his sleep. Mom had gone 6 months prior. The funeral was a blur. Sarah showed up in a black designer dress that was a little too short, and sunglasses she never took off. She didn't cry. She spent the entire wake asking the guests if they knew any good real estate appraisers in the area. I was too grief-stricken to notice the red flags. I was busy comforting Leo, who was devastated. The day after the funeral, we met at the family attorney's office. Mr. Henderson had been our family lawyer for decades. He looked pale when we walked in. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Sit down," Mr. Henderson said, his voice trembling slightly. "Let's get this over with," Sarah said, checking her watch. "I have a flight to catch tonight." "I thought the will was standard," I said, holding Leo's hand. "Everything split 3 ways, with the house placed in a special needs trust for Leo." Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. He pulled out a document. It wasn't the thick, leather-bound will I had seen Dad working on years ago. It was a single, flimsy sheet of paper. "This is the most recent last will and testament," Mr. Henderson said. "Dated 3 weeks prior to your father's death." I froze. 3 weeks ago? Dad was on heavy morphine 3 weeks ago. He didn't know what day it was. "Nevertheless," the lawyer said, "it is notarized and signed." He began to read. "I, Thomas Miller, being of sound mind, hereby revoke all prior wills and codicils. I leave my entire estate, including the hardware business, the savings accounts, the stock portfolio, and the family residence at 42 Oak Lane, solely to my daughter, Sarah Miller." The room went silent. The air was sucked out of the room. "To my sons, Daniel and Leo, I leave my collection of vintage tools and the contents of the attic, as they have sentimental value." That was it. $3 million in assets. The house customized for Leo's wheelchair. The business I had run for free for a year. All of it gone. "What?" I whispered. "That's impossible. Dad would never leave Leo with nothing. He made me promise to look after him." Sarah stood up, a smug smile spreading across her face. "Well, Daddy obviously realized who was actually capable of managing the wealth. You're a hardware store clerk, Dan, and Leo. Well, Leo needs a facility, not a mansion." "You did this." I stood up, slamming my hands on the table. "You came to visit him 3 weeks ago. You were alone with him for an hour while I went to the pharmacy. What did you make him sign?" "I didn't make him do anything," Sarah said coolly. We had a long talk about his legacy. He wanted his assets to grow. He knew I had the vision to take the family name to the next level. He was hallucinating, I shouted. He thought you were mom half the time. This is fraud, Sarah. Careful, Danny boy, she hissed. Accuse me of fraud, and I'll sue you for defamation. The will is ironclad. I checked. She turned to the lawyer. Mr. Henderson, when do I get the keys? Mr. Henderson looked at me with sorrowful eyes. Technically, the estate transfers immediately. She is the executor and sole beneficiary. I felt like I was going to throw up. My sister had manipulated our dying, drugged-up father into signing away our future. She knew Leo couldn't survive on his own. She didn't care. I have to ask you guys, if you were in my shoes, sitting across from a sibling who just stole your parents' legacy, what would you do? Would you flip the table? Would you attack them? Or would you freeze in shock like I did? Let me know in the comments. The next 24 hours were a nightmare. Sarah didn't waste a second. She posted an eviction notice on our bedroom doors the same afternoon. I'm listing the house, she announced. The market is hot. I've already got a developer interested who wants to tear it down and build condos. I need you out so we can stage the property. Tear it down? I choked out. Dad built this house. The ramps, the lifts, they're for Leo. It's prime real estate, Dan. The land is worth more than the sentimental lumber. You have 48 hours to vacate. Where is Leo supposed to go? I screamed. He needs accessible housing. I don't have first and last month's rent for an apartment like that. Figure it out, she said, checking her manicure. You're a man. Get a job that actually pays. She gave us 2 days. I spent those 2 days frantically calling friends, packing what I could into my beat-up sedan, and trying to explain to Leo why we had to leave the only home he'd ever known. Which brings us back to the porch. Sarah stood there, drinking Dad's wine, watching us struggle in the rain. Oh, I almost forgot, she called out, kicking a cardboard box toward us with her designer boot. The will said you get the contents of the attic. I had the movers bring this down. It's just Dad's old junk receipts, blueprints, dusty books. Take it and go. I looked at the soggy box. This is all we get. A box of trash. It's what he wanted, she shrugged. Now, get off my property before I call the police. I grabbed the box. I grabbed the handles of Leo's wheelchair. I looked at my sister one last time. You won't get away with this, Sarah, I said, the rain dripping off my nose. You think money is everything? You just sold your soul for a pile of bricks. She laughed. It was a cruel, high-pitched sound. Karma is for poor people, Dan. Enjoy the motel. She slammed the door. I pushed Leo to the van I had rented with the last of my savings. We drove to a cheap Motel 6 on the outskirts of town. That night, Leo fell asleep crying. I sat on the stained carpet, staring at the soggy box of junk Sarah had thrown at us. I felt broken, defeated. I opened the box, just to distract myself from the urge to drive back there and burn the house down. It was mostly trash. Old tax returns from the 90 seconds, manuals for tools that didn't exist anymore. But at the bottom, wrapped in a plastic bag that had kept it dry, was a thick blue folder. It was labeled, Project Omega, do not discard. I opened it. My hands started to shake. I read the first page, then the second. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. Sarah thought she had inherited a gold mine. She thought she had outsmarted us. But she had been so busy counting her chickens that she never bothered to check the coop. She didn't know about the secret Dad had buried in the land. She didn't know about the clause in the original property deed from 1980, and she definitely didn't know what was about to happen when she tried to sell that land to a developer. I looked at Leo, sleeping peacefully. Don't worry, buddy, I whispered. Sarah wanted the house. She's going to wish she never stepped foot in it. I sat on the floor of that dingy motel room, clutching the blue folder like it was a life raft. Outside, sirens wailed, but inside, my mind was racing faster than a Formula One car. My sister, Sarah, had stolen our $3 million inheritance. She had kicked her disabled brother out into the rain. She was currently sitting in our childhood home, drinking our father's wine, planning to bulldoze the place to build luxury condos. But she had made one fatal mistake. She treated our father's junk like trash. She threw the attic contents at me because she thought they were worthless. She was wrong. The folder I held, labeled Project Omega, wasn't just old blueprints. It was a detailed geological survey and a legal agreement with the city dating back 30 years. You see, our property sat on top of a massive, unstable limestone shelf. The document I was holding was a sinkhole variance and structural reinforcement agreement. Basically, the house was safe, because Dad, being a master carpenter and engineer, had spent a fortune installing industrial-grade steel pilings deep into the bedrock to stabilize the foundation. That was the restoration work he had done all those years. But here was the kicker. The agreement with the city stated that the land was non-developable for multi-unit structures. The ground could support one house with deep pilings. It could not support a condo complex. And there was a second document in the folder, a terrifying letter from the EPA regarding an old underground oil tank from the 1950 seconds that had leaked into the soil. Dad had contained it, but the cleanup cost to remove it entirely, which is required by law if you sell the property or change the zoning, was estimated at $450,000. Dad had kept the house because he knew how to maintain it. He kept these papers to warn us. Sarah didn't know about the sinkhole. She didn't know about the oil leak. She just saw dollar signs. I decided to stay quiet. I know some of you are screaming, tell her, save the family fortune. But remember, she left Leo and me homeless. She laughed in our faces. Would you warn the person who ruined your life, or would you let them walk off the cliff? Be honest. I chose silence. 2 weeks passed. Leo and I moved into a small, accessible apartment. It was tight, but it was home. I got a job at a larger hardware chain. We were surviving. Meanwhile, Sarah was living loud. I saw it all on Instagram. She bought a new Porsche. She threw a massive estate sale party, where she sold off Mom's antique furniture and Dad's tool collection for pennies on the dollar. It broke my heart to see strangers walking off with my parents' memories, but I held my ground. Then, the first domino fell. I got a text from an old neighbor, Mrs. Higgins. Danny, there are big trucks at the house. Excavators. Your sister is tearing up the backyard garden. Sarah was rushing. She wanted to break ground for the condos before the sale was even finalized to impress the developers. She was trying to dig a foundation for a show unit in the backyard. I drove by that evening, parking down the street. The backyard, where Mom used to grow roses, was a mud pit. 3 days later, I got the call. Not from Sarah, but from Mr. Henderson, the lawyer. He sounded frantic. Dan, have you spoken to your sister? No, I said, eating a sandwich on my lunch break. Why? She's in trouble. Big trouble. She started excavation without a proper geological survey. The vibration from the heavy machinery. Dan, it cracked the limestone shelf. I sat up straight. What happened? A sinkhole opened up in the backyard. It swallowed the excavator, and it destabilized the main house. The steel pilings your father installed shifted. The entire east wing of the house, the kitchen, and the master bedroom collapsed into the ground this morning. My jaw dropped. I knew the ground was unstable, but I didn't think it would happen this fast. Is she okay? I asked. I hated her, but she was my sister. She's physically fine, Henderson said, but financially, Dan, the city condemned the property an hour ago. It's uninhabitable. And because she started construction without the proper permits or environmental checks, the EPA was alerted. The oil tank, I whispered. Exactly. They found the soil contamination. They're hitting her with fines of $10,000 a day until it's cleaned up. And since the house is destroyed, the insurance company is denying the claim, because the damage was caused by negligent construction activity. The $3 million asset was now a $3 million liability. The land was worthless. The house was a pile of rubble, and Sarah was on the hook for the cleanup. I drove to the site. Police tape surrounded the property. It looked like a bomb had gone off. Half the house was literally gone, slumped into a dark, muddy pit in the earth. The Porsche Sarah's new pride and joy was crushed under a fallen oak tree that had slid into the hole. Sarah was sitting on the curb, covered in dust, sobbing. She wasn't the arrogant heiress anymore. She was a scared little girl. She saw me and scrambled up. Dan, you have to help me. She ran over, grabbing my shirt. It's gone. It's all gone. The lawyer says I'm bankrupt. They're going to seize my assets to pay for the environmental cleanup. I have nowhere to go. I looked at the ruin of my childhood home. It hurt to see it destroyed, but in a way, the house had died with Dad. I can't help you, Sarah, I said calmly. But you have money. Dad must have left you something. He left me a box of junk, I reminded her. Remember? You threw it at me in the rain. Please, she begged, tears streaking the dust on her face. I'm your sister. Can I stay with you? Just until I get back on my feet. I looked at Leo, who was sitting in the car, watching. I remembered the motel. I remembered the eviction notice. I remembered karma is for poor people. No, I said. Her face went pale. What? You'd leave me on the street? You made your choice, Sarah. You wanted the whole inheritance. You wanted to be the sole beneficiary. Well, you are. You inherited the sinkhole. You inherited the oil leak. You inherited the debt. It's all yours. I turned to walk away. Wait, she screamed. What was in the box? You knew this would happen. I stopped. I pulled a photocopy of the Project Omega survey from my pocket and dropped it on the ground at her feet. Dad tried to warn us, I said. He left the instructions in the attic. If you had treated us like family instead of trespassers, we would have opened that box together. We would have seen the survey. We would have known not to dig. She stared at the paper, realizing that her greed had literally caused the ground to swallow her fortune. Goodbye, Sarah, I said. Sarah declared bankruptcy. She had to sell everything she owned, the jewelry, the clothes, the remaining stocks just to pay the EPA fines. She moved back to Miami, but not as an influencer. Last I heard, she's waiting tables at a diner and living in a studio apartment with 3 roommates. As for the property, since it was condemned and worthless, the city seized it. But here is the final twist. 6 months later, the city auctioned off the useless lot. Since nobody wanted a toxic sinkhole pit, the starting bid was $5,000. I bought it. I used the small savings I had built up. Since I had Dad's blueprints, I knew exactly how to fix the pilings. I knew how to cap the oil tank properly, because the manual was in the junk box. It took me 2 years of hard work, but I restored the remaining half of the house. I turned the collapsed pit into a beautiful, sunken garden with a koi pond stabilized correctly this time. Leo and I moved back in last month. We sat on the porch, the same porch Sarah kicked us off of, and drank a toast to Dad. We didn't get the $3 million, but we got our home back, and we have each other. Sarah has never been invited back. So, did I go too far by not warning her? Or was this the perfect example of play stupid games, win stupid prizes? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for reading. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about family drama and instant karma.